Hello and welcome to the LGBTQ review, where we review LGBTQIA+ content. This week we're looking at Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
They're ready for stardom. They're ready for fame. They're ready for their close-up.
Come on, girls. Let's go shopping.
This is the story of three hard-working guys.
What kind of cabaret do you do?
We dress up in women's clothes and parade around mouthing the words to other people's songs.
Who are about to discover
Ta-da!
Been asked to do a show out of town?
How long is the run?
4 weeks.
that hitting the road is hard.
I hereby christen this budget Barbie camper Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Especially in heels.
Sorry.
So Priscilla, Queen of the Desert is a 1994 Australian comedy movie about three friends driving across the Australian outback.
In a bus. They named Priscilla. It is pink at one point, about halfway through.
It's two drag queens and a transgender woman, and like the main character is going to see his son.
I love this film. It's one of my favourite films. I'd probably say that. I keep going on about it, I think. And I didn't realise it was this year that we saw the stage show, isn't it? It seems so long ago, but I think that was So yeah, I have a lot of love for this film. It's such a 90s film. Like, I love before film started using digital more and they had to shoot on film because there wasn't a cheaper way. It just has like a great look. A fact before we get into it that I only learnt today was that because it was like an Australian film, they could only have one non-Australian actor. Wild.
It's weird that they gave them funding because they couldn't get funding anywhere else. And everyone was like, no, there's so many points of this film are offensive. It will never be made. And to be fair, I've watched the documentary and the bits that they're talking about are offensive. But yeah, it's really strange for them to be like, absolutely nobody will fund you. And then like the big Australian funding body is like, well, all right.
That is super strange. The majority of the criticism is about Cynthia as a character who Bob like drunkenly marries, I think is the setup of it. Like he wakes up in bed and like, who are you? And he's like, and she's like, I'm your wife. And then she like has some paperwork that says married. And yeah, she's just like a massive stereotype. And like famously, she has the scene with the ping pong balls. I don't think dated is the right word because that implies like it was like acceptable or good at a certain time. Because there's like lots of criticism.
They're still doing it in the music, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, so she like is essentially like a gold digger, I guess. It's just a bit gross from that section of the film. It's just like there's so much great kind of joyous stuff in this film, and then that just comes along, and it's just like, ugh, I can't wait for this to be over. But I mean, people were writing about it at the time, and as you said, like there was problems with funding for stuff. Presumably, this is a bit of that.
That and them dressing up the Aboriginal man.
Some of the criticism, which is just like in general, it is just like three white men, and it's only their lives being put on screen out of that whole community, and there's like some pretty poor representation of women on screen. Apart from Cynthia, there is, I can only think of two other women characters, which is his wife and the lady in the bar who Bernadette has a drinking contest with.
I mean, one of the main characters is a woman.
Yeah.
You said three men, which, like, you mean the actors, but if we're talking about representation of women, one of the main characters is a woman.
Yeah. Sorry, I've mixed those two things up.
When the filmmaker is growing up, it's illegal to be gay, and the punishment for two men having sex is what is higher, that like years in prison is higher than heterosexual rape. It's like a very strange time to grow up in Australia. Even in the late 80s, like 1989, there's one really famous case by the cliffs of Bondi Beach where this guy was found dead and they classed it as suicide, even though he was like holding a clump of somebody else's hair and nobody was ever. And that's like one case, and that's when they're starting to make the movie. So the film comes out of Oxford Street in Sydney, where the gay bars are and where these like punk drag queens are, and those are the people that are sort of leading this pushback against like homophobes and police. Similarly to America, it's the drag queens that are like at the forefront of this movement. So I can completely understand why this is their big film and why it centers around who it centers around.
Isn't it strange how Bernadette, that character, is like in the early 90s, and I don't remember any conversations about being negative, and now that would be like such a boring, shitty conversation that people will be having. Hugo Weaving's character, I mean, we keep saying gay men. There's that big bit in the film where he's like, I don't know, which implies he's bi or isn't just like identifies as gay. So when people, I mean, we've done it a little bit, but also everyone else talks about it like they are all gay men, which isn't true. So Hugo Weaving plays Mitzi, Guy Pearce plays Felicia, and Terence Stamp plays Bernadette, and Bill Hunter plays Bob, who knew Terence Stamp, and that's why he took the role, which is nice.
Terence Stamp said, I'm not doing it unless he plays my boyfriend.
Oh, really? That's fun. The director took them out in drag before the filming to kind of get a taste for it.
The extras in the bar were just actual local miners. That was also the scene where Terence Stamp like actually got into character, because before that he was just terrified and couldn't do it and couldn't find the voice, and because it was so unlike anything that he'd done before. They didn't let him see any of the film, and they didn't have any mirrors through the whole thing, so he couldn't see himself. In his head he thought he was like the most beautiful woman in the world, and then he sat down at Cannes and watched it and he was like, oh I see what they've done in this, but I
love in this film, and I remember when I first saw it, I just really, really loved it, because you don't really see it that much. They never try and explain anything. They don't give them like some sort of like origin story or anything. It's like when they cut back to the bathtub scene or the Christmas scene, it's just like they like play around with that idea.
They originally did have an origin scene, but they cut it.
Oh, thank God they did.
You actually make money by dressing up like a woman?
Oh, sure. You can make a fine living in a pair of heels.
But yeah, the costumes especially, if we can talk about anything, the costume is just like amazing. Do you have a favourite?
The lame trail in the wind on the top of the bus.
Good.
Obviously.
I really love Hugo Weaving's like rainbow like afro that he has in the desert.
Casting process seemed really interesting, I thought, when I read about it on Wikipedia. But also, obviously, I was aware that it might not be true because it's on Wikipedia. When I was reading that, I wrote down, like, I would like to watch a film about this. They should make a film about it. And then I realised that they had made a film about it, Between a Frock and a Hard Place. And it was great. But they hardly mention anything that they mention on Wikipedia. Like, they do mention that they were thinking about Tim Curry, and Tony Curtis was
Tony Curtis
signed in to play Bernadette. But then his new wife didn't let him. She was like, no, you're not doing that. He was like, I am Bernadette. She was like, no.
That would have been good. I liked her stamp in this, but I think that would have been very interesting.
It would be interesting to see somebody who was completely on board from the get-go, instead of being like, because Terence Stamp said he read the script and he didn't like it, and then his friend came over one day and his agent rang, and he was like, yeah, I didn't like it, and the agent was like, oh, we all read it and we all really liked it. And then his friend, as he was on the phone, was like, just say yes to it. Like, you're scared of it, just say yes to it, it'll probably go away anyway. So he said yes, and then that's how he ended up doing it. There's a Guy Pearce interview as well where he's like, yeah, he just wouldn't tuck, which is weird, right? Because he's the one that had the operation. I think he's great, and he narrates the documentary, and you like see him narrating it, and it is really good because he's like, yeah, I just wasn't into it. But Elliot says if he had made a pro-gay film that dealt with AIDS, nobody would have watched it, but like everybody watched this, and it changed everything quite a lot.
I mean, if you look at today's drag scene and what's popular, like Drag Race, it like continues to be such a massive, I don't know, gay export. I don't know how I feel about it. I imagine people feel very strongly about it one way or another, but it's just really sad that we don't give a shit about, people dying from AIDS, but will like happily just steal drag for themselves and absorb it into their own culture. I don't know. It's that thing of like people from LGBTQ plus can be seen if they're like this like flamboyant, happy person who isn't usually like a main character in shows or whatever it is. But then you have anything important to say, it's like who cares? You don't care. But I mean, they snuck a lot of stuff in, which a lot of films have to do, sneak it in, like that big important scene with Guy Pearce when he gets attacked. I'm going to give this 4.7 re-bottled bottles of gin.
I'm going to give it 4.6 cakes in the rain.
So that's what we thought. Let us know what you thought in the comments below, and you can follow us on Twitter at LGBTQ_review. If you've got any suggestions or recommendations, let us know, and we will hopefully get to them at some point in the future. Thanks for watching. Thumbs up. Thumbs up. As I go away into the distance.